East, but he is not new to Bradford. He has been living in Bradford for the last 30 years. He has been a local councillor for many years and hold portfolios like education and so on, where you all have a lot of talks for many years. David is currently involved in key issues in the Parliament, and that is he has put forward a bill for the social care for elder people. Now, maybe that he will be speaking a little bit of that. We are very fortunate that David has agreed to come and speak to us this morning and stayed from the morning here, taking notes of various things what was happening. So please welcome David and listen and see what he has to say about the community cohesion. David, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. It's great today because I met Michelle today, who grew up in the same village that I did, just outside Lincoln. I was born in Lincoln, so I am an off-government. It's nearly 35 years since I've been here, but I remember when I first arrived, I came for 1 year, 35 years ago, to go to the university and just sort of got stuck really. And I remember when I first arrived, I was up near Thornbury, a little close up there, and I moved from Lincoln, and we'd been in a week or so, and the family next door brought us a bag of apples, which was really nice. I thought, very nice. A white family. They came round with a bag of apples and said, we'd like these apples. There was a woman who came. And I said, well, that's very good, very friendly, as we've only just been here a week. And she said, yes, she says, actually, the Asian family next door gave them to us, and my husband won't eat them. And I thought, where the bloody hell have I come? Now, where I come from, and certainly in terms of the building, I think there was one person who wasn't white, and they were the surgeon in the local hospital some years ago. And that's how it was. And I thought, well, where am I? What? I just did not understand it. And then one of the people in the groups was talking about the ill-clear, oh, we don't have any problems over here with racism or anything, just because there's nobody to be racist against. Except, of course, when you go in the pub at night and then you may hear one or two comments. But it's a strange place to get to know, but I feel very passionately about the place. I've got always got fond memories of this particular room. I've been in many, many meetings in this room over the years. And we had a dreadful Ofsted report in May 2000, and I took over, I was a councillor for 26 years, and I took over the education portfolio, sort of chair of education role, the day after the Ofsted report. And we had a lot of things to try and put right. And one of them, in the Ofsted report, was very, very critical, was the lack of engagement with the Black and Asian community. And some here may have been, certainly would be involved in BAG. I think you were involved in BAG, the Black and Asian Governors Group, and we wanted to support that. We actually had a meeting in here. And it's indicative, really, of the response from the people in the room, that when we started saying, well, what can we do to encourage more, we wanted to obviously raise attainment levels in the Black and Asian community. And somebody, and it was not a white person, said, well, hang on a minute, the lowest attaining group as a whole, actually, in the Bradford schools, are white working class boys. So why are we restricting this to Black and Asian governments? And really what we ought to be doing is looking how we can support low education attainment for wherever it comes, from whichever. So we actually called it BAG Plus. For those of you who are a certain age, that will be funnier than if you've never heard of BAG Plus, but we thought it was really, really funny. But it was good, wasn't it good? At the time, this was just after the riots when we got the group together and was developing it. But at that time, somebody was saying, well, no, let's not, isn't that where we've gone wrong in many ways? Let's just look wherever educational attainment is low, then let us see how we can work together to do something about it. One thing I just do want to mention, it has popped up a couple of times, but it is really important. One of the most enjoyable community cohesion activities I've been involved in as a local councillor was actually looking at the gulf that exists between young people and old people. And we had a really good project which called My Faculty. For those who don't know, that's faculty, spoke by somebody under the age of 18, but my faculty, and they did a filmed project which involved older people. And it was about, this is my faculty, and this is your faculty, and we were all living in faculty together. And it was wonderful to bridge that particular gap. I've also now, delightfully, because it's been a really great addition really to the other areas that I've been involved in, that's working with disabled groups, and particularly the social care bill that's going through, because that is yet another huge gulf that exists within our community and our society, I think, between those with disabilities of all sorts. And I guess we've all got a disability to some degree. Mine happens to be a Liberal Democrat at the moment, but we've got. But did I come out loud? We've all got them to some degree, and again, we've got some fabulous organisations in Bradford who are supporting the disabled. And it's really good that they are more and more becoming included, just as they should be in the community. Right, now, I am quite often asked for, what's your favourite book? What's the best book you've ever read? So I usually, I was actually asked it as a children's book at conference, and I said Huckleberry Finn, or Treasure Island. It was one of those two. Or it was one of the Mr. Men books, if I was being honest. But the one I always say is my favourite book is one called The Nature of Prejudice by Gordon Allport. Now this was written nearly 60 years ago, so it's dated somewhat in terms of the language in the book, and there's hardly any mentions in here, and again it's a sign of the times, there's hardly any mentions in here of sexism, for instance, and it's an omission, but it's been put right by later editions of this, supplemented by people who worked with Gordon Allport. But it's a fabulous book, because at the end of the day what we are talking about so often is is ignorance, prejudice, which is born out of ignorance, which is, in the true sense of the word ignorance, we just don't know. And we tend to fear what we don't know. And so if we can break down the prejudice prejudgment, thinking this way about somebody that I don't actually know, we can be a long way towards understanding why we have so many problems in the world. There's a little bit here, but I will read if you don't mind. Civilised men and women, don't forget this is 1954, and also don't forget the context of the time, what was happening in, it was at Harvard was Gordon Allport, and this was at the time bubbling up in the civil rights and so on. Civilised men and women have gained notable mastery over energy, matter and inanimate nature generally, and are rapidly learning to control physical suffering and premature death. But, by contrast, we appear to be living in the Stone Age, so far as the handling of human relationships are concerned. Our deficit is in social knowledge. It seems to be a void at every step in our progress. The surplus in wealth accumulated to the human race through applied natural science is virtually cancelled by the costs of armaments and war. The gains in medical science are widely negated by the poverty that results from war, from trade barriers erected largely by hatred and fear. And it is a fact, in my view, that we have progressed very little socially as animals in terms of how we actually get on with each other. It required years of labour and billions of dollars to gain the secret of the atom. It will take a still greater investment to gain the secrets of man's irrational nature. It is easier, someone has said, to smash an atom than a prejudice. We've got a huge amount of work to do. And the answer is laid out in here in very, very many ways in terms of how it analyses in great depth what prejudice is, where it stems from, and the causes of prejudice in very, very many ways. But it says, I understand this, liberal is often a flabby word, and tolerance may seem to be a flabby word. When we say that we tolerate a headache, our shabby apartment, or a neighbour, we certainly do not mean that we like them, but merely that in spite of our dislike, we shall endure them. Yet the term tolerance has a more rugged meaning. We say that an individual who is on friendly terms with all sorts of people is a tolerant person. He makes no distinction of race, colour, creed. He not only endures, but in general approves his fellow men and women. It is a warmer grade of tolerance that we wish to discuss. Now, tolerance does get a bad word because it is often a flabby word, but it is something that needs to be, I think, developed. The only thing I will be intolerant of is intolerance. But I do think we need, and there are times when we need to be intolerant of racism or sexism. But we also need to learn to be tolerant of people who just are not like us. What Gordon Allport developed was something called contact theory. And basically what he was saying is that when people come together, people who are different come together, there is at that point in time an opportunity. And you can either go that way, or you can go that way. And the account I gave earlier on of bringing the two football teams, one off the Thorpe Edge estate and one off the Porishad, Bangladesh sports hall down near Bradford City, and bringing them together and say, right, you lot, very important for Bradford that you should get on, you lot, play football in two separate teams that were separated one wide on Bangladesh. Guess what happened? Young people playing football in that situation just kicked lumps out of each other, and it was inexpertly handled. Is that a word? Should be. And shows how at that point when people come together who are different, it can go that way or that way. And one of the things again we talked about is people are involved in this through well-meaning, and they are well-meaning purposes. It doesn't necessarily mean that they are good at it, and it doesn't mean that there will be a positive outcome to that. And in the book it goes on to talk about the conditions, and I said criteria, but the conditions is right, the conditions that need to exist if it's going to be a positive outcome. And if you look at a place like South Africa, wherever there has been, or in Palestine, where there is clearly apartheid, the keeping of people apart, people think that in South Africa, in apartheid South Africa, they kept people apart because they didn't like to mix with them, and that they didn't want to be part of the same. The answer is that the people who were leading the apartheid system knew that if people came together, they would actually get on with each other. There'd be clashes, there'd be terrible situations, we know that. But what they feared was the people from different backgrounds coming together and sharing a bag of crisps, chatting to each other at bus stop. And the apartheid system depended upon keeping people separate, but because by being separate, they reinforced the prejudices that were already held. And this is why coming together is so crucially important. There was a whole batch, and they continue to this day. I was talking to, some people must know Delroy Dakers, and I was talking to him yesterday about how we can actually do more through sport, through SCAR, to bring people together, and also to actually quite a niche project, which would be to look at more people from the black and ethnic minority community going into officiated football matches and so on. But there's lots and lots going on in Bradford over the years, bringing people together. There is another level. I always call, there's a different stream, what I would call soft, and that's not a rude word, soft community cohesion events. People come together from different communities and mingle, get on with each other. There is, at another level, the deep-rooted prejudices and hatred and nastiness of racism or disability, hate crimes which exist, and that requires a different level, an extremely skilled level of intervention to deal with it. All are very, very important. I'll finish really by saying where I come from on this really, and that is I see there being three key pillars if we're going to have a more tolerant society, but also just a happier one for us. The first one is that of freedom, and the freedom of individuals, whatever the background, to be able to live their lives to the full. Someone once said to me, the saddest thing in life is that so many people go to the graves with their best songs unsung. And, you know, they carry it, and very often, you know, we all regret things, don't we, in life that we do, but the worst thing of all is to get to the end of the life and think, I wish I had. You know, I wish I'd learned to play the piano. I wish I'd supported Bradford City when they were in the Premier League. It's that regret of not doing. And so what we should be enabling, supporting people to do is to do what they're capable of doing. The freedom, not constrained, as it says in the preamble to our Constitution, by poverty, ignorance or conformity. They should not be constrained by society which says that is right and that is wrong. But freedom, of course, cannot exclude the golden rule. And whether it's a philosophical rule that's developed through years of philosophical development, or and you will, I guess, agree that it's very often based upon long-held religious principles, that of the golden rule. The freedom, but constrained by my freedom must not impinge on yours. The golden rule. Yes, I should be able to live the life, but not at the cost of you. So along with freedom is the second pillar, which is that of responsibility. My responsibility is not just to myself. So when I want to do what I want to do, what does that mean for other people? And the third one of all is that of community. Because if we are going to get on, if we are going to fulfill our own true potential, as an Olympic gold medalist, in terms of getting good grades at school, in terms of whatever, if we are going to fulfill our true potential, we're not going to do it on our own. We're only going to do it with others supporting us and helping us, nurturing us and so on. And a community can be anywhere. This is a community today. Your homes, your families are communities. You go in and out of communities all the different time. But what's required if it's to be successful is a sense of community at that point. And the value of these events is it builds communities which then hopefully could go on to be part of other communities, and so it goes the pebbles in the pond. I've attended many of these events, and I know they were saying about we attend these events and then what goes. Well, the answer is we just keep on doing it. In Bradford, we cannot do enough of this, and it just needs to grow and keep going. When just after the riots, I spoke during that summer, and I was profoundly, particularly the second riots, because you think the first riot, and we've had several minor ones, but the big one, 97, and then 95, and then 2001. But you can sort of have one riot and explain it as being weird. If you have another one, I was shocked with the second one. Profoundly shocked, and I needed to talk to as many people, and I went around and talked to lots of people, including some people in this room. I went and said, what do we do about this? How do we stop this ever happening again? And one of the things that we came up with as a solution, which involved the university actually, was to say, you must never, I suppose you must be ever vigilant, because a family, we are a family, a community, needs to constantly be topping itself up with goodwill. Even your own families, you know, you have troubles, don't you? There's a tension there all the time between members of the family. And in a place like Bradford, which is a tough place, there will always be, and I was criticised for saying this was, but I think in a place like Bradford, there will always be a tendency towards tension. Because people come from different places and so on. So we must be ever very vigilant and always looking at ourselves. And I suggested that the university, through the Peace Studies Department, every 2 years, because everybody, you know, big reaction to the riots, and we must have an action plan. But I said in 2 years' time you'll have forgotten it, and you must never forget it. So every 2 years, I said, we should have a State of the Nation report from the university, and just look at ourselves, never forget. Always think, what's happening? Could it be better? Where are the tensions? What can we do about it? And I put that to a politician. It was a hung council at the time, so we needed another group. And he said, well, no, we can't get the university to do it because we need people who know something about the real world. So it was knocked on the head. But I still think we need it. We still need it. Simon Cook. What a surprise, yeah. So, I was supposed to finish on a big ending, but there is no ending, is there? There's just a succession of efforts. It's a journey. We'll never be there, but we must never, ever give up. Thank you very much.
Thank you, David.